by the way.
The webinar is now live. We're now live.
Right. You should read the WhatsApp, people.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for those people who've joined us already. We're going to be starting in about 3 or 4 minutes from now. Good morning for all those joining us currently. Thank you so much for logging in. We're just seeing the attendees gradually coming in as we go. We're going to start literally in 3 minutes. At 2 minutes past 10 New York time, we're going to kick it off straight away. So my apologies for the little bit of waiting on time. Okay, so Shavua Tov to everyone. What we're going to do in about 2 minutes is I'm just going to give a brief introduction of what's going to be going on for the next 45 to 60 minutes. And we really will be running straight away, straight into introductions in 60 seconds from now.
Jeffrey, you look really comfortable. What are those red things behind you? I have never seen that before here in Israel.
We build with bricks, not sticks, little piggy.
Bricks? What's that? Yeah, Ben, is the lighting better by me?
Yeah, much better. Thank you, Daniel. We're live, just so you know. Okay, let's kick off things because I don't want to keep people waiting too long. My name is Ben Levine. I am the sales director at Capitil Real Estate, located on King David in Jerusalem. All I'm going to do now is introduce the whole panel today, and then we will kick things off. So we have joining us we are very fortunate to have joining us Yair Givati. Yair is a real estate lawyer, an excellent English-speaking real estate lawyer, and he's going to talk today about the legal process, the taxes, and the basics, and he will fill you all in on everything you need to know. Next, we have Svi Shapiro from First Israel Mortgage. Thank you for joining us, Svi. Svi will be talking to us about financing, he'll be explaining the basics and talking to you about everything you need to know. Next, we have Daniel Eisenberg from Israel Transfer. Thank you for joining us, Daniel. Daniel will be talking about moving your money, how to do it, understanding the process of getting your money from America to Israel. Sounds very simple. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as it sounds. So Daniel will be talking to us about that. Jeffrey Mark, thank you for joining us, Jeffrey. Jeffrey is in Teaneck. The rest of us are in Israel. Thank you for joining us at 10 o'clock in the morning. Jeffrey will be talking to us all about interior renovations, how to do them from so far away. Can you move your furniture from America to Israel? Can you buy new stuff? Jeffrey is the man who will be talking on these things. Avi Goldberg from City of Gold, property manager. Once you've been through the whole process, once you've purchased an apartment, please God, Avi is the man who looks after the units. He is the man you call up when you want to know what's going on. He inspects the apartments, he looks after it, he updates it, he keeps you in the loop. And Avi will talk to you about what you need to be aware of in terms of property management in Israel. So let me just tell you what's going to happen now. Each one of the panelists is going to speak for between 4 to 6 minutes on their respective topics. It shouldn't last for more than half an hour. And then we're going to take questions from all of you. And we'll throw in some other very valuable bits of information. Just 2 very important things to let you know. In a few days' time, you'll be receiving an email just summarizing all the information from today and all our contact details. And number two, no question is too small. So ask any question and we'll try and answer it. And number three, the last thing that I want you all to know, we all do this panel together because we all have worked together and we know that we all offer great services to all of you. But it's very important that you all should know that you can just use one of us. So for example, if you already own a home and you want to renovate it or you need it looking after, feel free to speak to just Jeffrey or just Avi. If you need a lawyer, not an agent, whatever it is, we're all available individually, but we also all obviously love working together because we know how well we all work together. Okay, so I'm Ben Levine. I'm going to kick you off. I'm the real estate agent. My role as that real estate, what does a real estate agent do for you? Am I doing exactly what they do for you in New York, New Jersey? Well, I think my role is slightly different. And that is because you are a long way away. And buying property from a distance is really about A, trusting someone, and B, someone understanding you. The biggest thing that you need to know buying property in Israel or Jerusalem or wherever you're looking to buy is that the market here is nothing like the market in other countries, especially America. Firstly, system-wise, the system works in a different way. In this country, you have a buyer's agent and a seller's agent. In America, the agent takes 5 or 6% and they split it 2 ways. That's not the way it works here. Here you have an agent who represents you as the buyer. Okay, you pay that agent 2% plus sales tax, which is 17% of the 2%. Now, the agent only gets that money when he or she finds a property for you. But it is very important that you select an agent who's going to look after your needs. And that's something that's really, really important, because the one thing that I feel like I offer, and in the last couple of weeks, I've sold a couple of apartments to Americans who were not in the country. And that's a very big responsibility on the broker. I do not take it lightly. In fact, I really was very cautious doing it, and I made sure everyone understood everything about the property, and they sent their friends, their family, and I was on the phone to them for countless hours, in a way pushing them against doing it, so that when they made the decision to do it, it was their decision. As a broker, my office on King David Street, where I actually share an office with Jeffrey Mark, who we are very fortunate to have on this panel, we really believe in offering top quality service to our clients. I don't want to sell you an apartment quickly if it's not the right apartment for you. It is much more important to me developing relationships, and that is really what I do. And the biggest thing for me is understanding a client's needs. The first thing I'm going to do with you is talk to you for half an hour, discussing no properties. I won't give you any suggestions. I'm just going to listen to you, ask questions, understand your needs, and then I'm going to put your expectations in order. The most important thing is that your expectations are in line with some kind of realistic thing you're going to be able to buy. Because the biggest mistake you can make is to fall in love with a property you can't afford to purchase. And I'm not one of those brokers who try to get that extra money out of you. I'm going to understand your needs. I'm going to take you around, and I want to really help you understand the market, get a market understanding. So this panel, I'm the Jerusalem agent. I talk about Jerusalem, but in future weeks, and this is the thing, in future weeks, we're running lots of events, even more detailed. You know, Jeffrey will be doing his own, Avi will be doing his own. There'll be one on financing, on banking, on taxes. So on a few weeks, we're bringing in other brokers, not just for Jerusalem. Okay, so if you're looking in Tel Aviv, you'll know that that week is Tel Aviv. If you're looking in Jerusalem, you'll know it's Jerusalem. So there'll be a few weeks specifically donated to that thing, which is why now I'm not going to talk about prices in Jerusalem, etc. Anyway, that I think starts you off with an understanding what the broker does for you in Jerusalem. Now I'm going to pass on to Yair Givati, who's going to talk to us about real estate law in terms of buying and renting apartments in Israel.
Hi, everybody. As Ben said, and I think he's very right, the reason that everybody here is working together is because we work as a team. You know, when I speak, for example, for Nefesh B'Nefesh about real estate, one of the most important things, the key factors that I say in the end of my lecture is you need to create yourself a team. At the end of the day, you're not buying real estate every day, and you definitely don't do it halfway across the world. So you need to make sure you create yourself the team So at the end of the day, everybody heard about the disaster stories, but we want to make sure that you do it as smooth as possible and as quiet and as peaceful as possible without any problems. So you will get the apartment you want at the end of the day. And this is, like Ben said, the team that everybody worked here together and made sure that the purchase is very smooth and you're happy at the end of the day. In Israel, the difference between a lawyer to what a lawyer does in America is quite significant. In the US, for example, you have a lawyer who just pretty much transfers title. And in addition, you have a title company and title insurance and escrow companies. In Israel, you do not have those. All those are done by your lawyer. So the whole structure is very different. In addition, the deal is structured very different. While in the US, the most important date is the closing date, the date in which you make the last payment and you take possession. In Israel, it's actually the opposite. The most important date is the day you sign the contract, the day that, and everything derives from that. If you need to report the transaction to the tax office, it has to be done within 30 days of the purchase. The purchase tax has to be paid within 60 days of the purchase. So all in all, it's a very, very different system to what you're used to. And the idea is to guide you. And the idea is to guide you through the entire process in a very organized manner, in a way that you'll feel very, very comfortable in the process, and that you know what you're going through, and make sure you get what you need at the end of the day. There's many, many aspects, as Ben said, that come together when it comes to buying a property. And this is the team that we have here. We try to gather the most important parts of getting an apartment, from finding the apartment to signing and going with the procedure of purchasing, getting the money to Israel for financing, getting a mortgage if you need, renovating the apartment at the end of the day, so you'll have it exactly the way you want it, and managing it after everything is done. And I think in this queue, I'll move along and I'll pass the baton to Daniel Eisenberg, who will be speaking about how to get the money to Israel.
Hi, thank you so much, Yair. It's nice to be together with friends. I've done a lot of work with all the panelists. My job is very simple. My job is to get you as many shekels for every dollar that you send with the least amount of headache. It seems like something that should be really, really simple. So anybody who's used to banking in the States knows you have Zelle, you have, you can Venmo people money, you can just, it's so easy just to send money that we don't even think about it. Israeli banking is not simple like that. First of all, the Israeli banks make it very difficult, especially for Americans, to send money over. You shouldn't be worried because, as I said, my job is to take care of all of that for you. We know exactly what the bank needs as far as from compliance. We know exactly what we need to get from your lawyer, from the realtor, to get everything to be ready for the signing. And what we're able to do is, because we transfer hundreds of millions of dollars, we get much better rates and much better service from the bank. And then we pass on those savings to you. So we deal with all aspects of, if it's a new rental, if it's a rental, if it's for purchase, with anything that's involved with getting the money to Israel, we're able to help you with that. So now I'm going to talk about the other aspect of money, is that you know, how, when you're going to be taking a mortgage, how do you actually do that in Israel? So that we're going to go to Tzvi.
Tzvi?
So if Tzvi's not here, then we'll go to Avi, and then we'll circle back to Tzvi. Avi's going to talk about, so let's say you're ready, you have the apartment, but you're only going to be coming there maybe just for the Chagim, or you're having an apartment that's going to be, you know, that you're going to be renting out to others. How do you manage that while you're in the States, but everything is going on in Israel with the property? So Avi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Avi Goldberg. I'm the founder and owner of City of Gold Property Management. We're currently managing over 200 apartments in Jerusalem. And as Daniel just explained, we step in after you've gone through this whole process that can be a challenging process, but when you go with the right people, it's a much easier process. Once you go through all of that, finally you get the key to your apartment, and then you're lost. You start getting utility bills, you have problems with your air conditioner, a neighbor calls you in the middle of the night that your alarm's going off and you have nothing to do. And then this dream of owning a property in Israel is suddenly a nightmare and you don't even know where to start. So that's where we come in. We're a property management company. We manage for three main types of clients. Our first type is vacant apartments. People who buy their apartments and they're the only ones that use the apartments. They come once, twice, 3 times a year. Maybe their family uses it. For these apartments, we carry out weekly inspections. We oversee all repairs, anything that needs to be fixed in the apartment. We prepare the apartment for arrivals. We close up afterwards. We collect all the mail, make sure all the bills are paid, make sure they make sense. Another type of owner that we manage for are owners that want to rent out their apartments for vacation rentals. So when they're not in Israel, they want to rent out the property in order to cover costs, cover their arnona. Depending on where the property is, it can actually be lucrative. And we take care of everything start to finish, from finding the renters, screening them, check in, check out. We have a full staff dedicated just to our vacation rentals. And then the third type of client that we manage for are long-term rentals. People that have no intention of using the property, they bought it, they rent it out for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and we are the contact person for the tenant. Any issue that comes up in the apartment, they reach out to our office, and we deal with anything that comes up in the apartment, including changing all the bills into their name, so it's no longer your responsibility. Everyone's property is unique, and everyone has their own unique needs for their property, and obviously we can build a package for each and everyone's unique needs, but that's an overall understanding of what we do as a property management company. I'm going to pass it over now to Jeffrey.
I think my audio is working now, guys.
Steve's back. All right, Steve, take it away.
I just wanted to keep you all in suspense about the exciting topic of mortgage financing in Israel. What does everyone want to know about financing in Israel? They want to know how it's different than financing in the U.S. So there's a few things that I just wanted to point out, and anything that's obviously of a more personal nature, personal scenarios, I'm happy to discuss one-on-one, offline. A few things. Number one, how much can you borrow? As a non-resident, you're limited to 50% of the purchase price, 50% LTV, and that is to finish the purchase price, or to complete the purchase. Once the purchase is completed, we are then able to secure an additional 10 to 15% loan, which can fund immediately thereafter. So as an example, you're buying a property for $1 million. The way it would normally work is that the borrower puts in $500,000, the bank then funds $500,000, and then immediately thereafter, the bank can fund another $100,000 to $150,000 to cover soft costs, such as purchase tax, renovations, your realtor, your lawyer, whatever other costs are involved in the deal. So that's first of all. If you are a resident in Israel, if you are buying your first property, you're able to borrow up to 75% of the purchase price. So those are the two numbers to keep in mind for residents and non-residents. Those are the max. In terms of qualifying for the mortgage, it's actually very similar to the U.S. They're going to be looking, the bank is going to be looking at your last 2 years tax returns, bank statements, credit report, score, things of that nature in order to determine what you can afford to borrow. One thing that is a quirk in the system, or that a lot of Americans find rather interesting, is that the banks do discriminate based on age. That's right. In America, it's illegal. In Israel, it's wholly embraced. So the banks like the mortgages to fully amortize, to be fully paid off by the age of 75 or 80, or some banks even go up to 82 years of age. So when you're, let's say, a 60-year-old borrower, let's say that the banks will give you a maximum term of 20 or 22 years. Another quirk to note is that the banks generally require life insurance. So in addition to the bank vetting you as a borrower who can afford to pay and having a mortgage as security backing their loan, they also require a life insurance policy naming the bank as the beneficiary. There are many instances where we are able to get that requirement waived. And in other instances, if there's an existing policy from the US that's assignable, we can sometimes assign that policy to the bank. In terms of where rates are today, rates are pretty much at historic lows, similar to how they're at historic lows in the US. The structure of the loans in Israel, or the way in which one structures a mortgage in Israel, can be a bit different than what one is used to in the US. 90-some% of loans in the US are 30-year fixed, or right around there. In Israel, you're actually able to mix and match different types of loans in order to make up your whole loan. So if you're buying a place for $1 million and you're taking a $500,000 mortgage, you're able to take, let's say, half of that on a fixed rate and half of that on a variable rate. Why would anyone want a variable rate? Well, rates in Israel, variable rates in Israel are very low at the moment. They could be anywhere from 1 to 2.5%, depending on whether it's dollars or shekels. And there's no prepayment penalties on those loans, whereas on fixed rate loans, there can be prepayment penalties. So that's a little bit about the structure of the financing in Israel. And I think that pretty much covers some of the nuances and some of the quirks that you need to know about. Again, anything that's specific or that you'd like to discuss in private, I'm here to answer any questions.
Jeffrey, on to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Yair. So, J Mark Interiors, we're located in Cedarhurst, New York. We've been here for 24 years, and we're also located on 22 King David Street, right between the Waldorf and the King David Hotel. We have design teams in both countries, both here in New York and in Israel. And what it does is it allows our clients, especially who are in the US, to be able to meet in our showroom in New York, and our design team in New York works with our design team, project management team in Israel. So we've got both ends of the world together, you know, which really makes it easier for our clients. So, for example, if you lived in New Jersey or Brooklyn or even Florida, and you were coming in for, you know, a couple of days and you wanted to meet with us and sit with us and do work with us, you don't need to fly to Israel to work with us. We have all your plans. We have all of samples and whatever is needed, you know, here in the U.S. And the people that we have working in our showroom in the U.S. are, like I said, very familiar with our team in Israel. So we really work hand in hand to make it a lot easier for you. And we handle the architecture, the design, and the project management. So we're really a full turnkey package. And very often when Ben is showing properties, we might be brought in for advice on whether you could have 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, or whatever that need is. And then as we're wrapping it up and finishing up, that's when Avi Goldberg, we sort of hand the ball over to Avi Goldberg, and he, you know, walks in and with his property management team, and they start getting everything set up and getting it ready for your arrival. And as far as Yair, Daniel, and Tzvi, they're somewhere in between all of that. They're your money people who take care of making sure that all that works together. But it's a great system, and it really works, and it makes it really easy for everybody. And that's really, I think, the goal of the whole panel that you're sitting here listening to. And we've done this many times already, and together, and it's really worked out really, really well. We all have, you know, like I said, like a good handful of clients that we're working with together, and it's really nice for the clients, and it makes buying in Israel just a great experience, something that you really like look forward to doing, and especially now with what's going on with the pandemic and whatnot, we have clients who are literally hiring us, you know, without even coming to see their properties. They're buying their properties, you know, on paper, and they know that they've got the right people, like you're seeing here on this panel, so they're able to do it that way. And thank God it's really working out well. We're working currently now with 3 different families who've never even been or seen their properties. You know, they're doing it all online with us, which is amazing. So we look forward to hearing from you. All right. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. So as Jeffrey, started, saying, one of the things that we're really, everybody here on the panel is actually being asked often, can you do it now at this point when you can't really get to Israel? The general answer is hands down, yes, it can definitely be done. Each one of us has done it in many, many times and recently when it comes to each one of individual part of work of what they do. Ben is able to show apartments, whether it's off plans or actual secondhand home, getting them money to Israel, getting a mortgage, renovating, as Jeffrey just said. So it's all be done. As Ben already said at the beginning, this is the beginning of a series of webinars in which we'll talk on different aspects of buying and renting in Israel, whether it comes to the legal side of things, the taxes involved with it, moving money to Israel, getting a mortgage. We're going to go in much more into depth. We are going to make each and every webinar a short, as you'll see, 25 minutes to half an hour, and then time for your questions. So I would like to encourage all of you right now, if you have any questions, please type it to us and we'll bring it up here so our panelists can actually ask the questions. You can all, of course, ask us questions afterwards when we'll be staying here for a little bit, and we will be also sending all the contact details of everybody so you can contact us individually. I'm going to kick it off with the first question that we got. Actually, Jessica asked two questions for you, Tzvi. The first one is about credit reports in America. She heard that credit reports in America mean nothing in Israel. And I'll answer, after Tzvi, I'll answer the question about the purchase tax, which is actually a very good question. And there's actually a great update about it because the tax was actually lowered recently. So after Tzvi, I'll come back and answer the tax question.
Okay. So most banks in Israel do require credit reports. There are some that do not. The main reason why banks want to see credit reports is they want to see what, if any, mortgage debt one is holding overseas. The credit report does outline that, so the banks can see it, as they are required by Bank of Israel regulations to take that debt into consideration. So, if one is making $10,000 a month net on their tax returns, but they're paying $3,000 a month on their mortgage, Bank of Israel regulations requires that the bank take that into consideration, and then they would adjust your income accordingly. Again, there are a couple of banks that don't pay much attention to it, or they only look at the credit score. There is one bank that doesn't even look at the credit score. But if you have good credit, it certainly helps. And if you have terrible credit, it's something we can work with. It doesn't mean you can't get a mortgage. But to begin with, it's good to provide the credit report and score, especially if you have good credit.
Thank you, Tzvi. Jessica, with regards to your question about the tax, this is a very good question because in Israel, the purchase tax is something you really have to take into consideration because it adds quite a bit to the purchase price. But lucky enough, a few weeks ago, the government actually lowered the purchase tax rates. So it's not a flat 8% as it used to be until a few weeks ago. Basically, in 2014, there was a major change in the purchase tax law in Israel, and they raised it to 8% and 10% depends on the purchase price. And also they changed the question to a question of residency other than a question of citizenship. So until 2014, if you were an Israeli citizen, you could, but not an Israeli resident, you could have still gotten the lower purchase tax rates. But now it's not. The question is not whether you're an Israeli citizen. You can be an Israeli citizen, but unless you're living in Israel, that will not help you. You need to be a resident to get a lower tax rate. But even if you buy now, there is they lower the tax. Instead of starting at 8% for someone who's not a resident, it was lowered to 5%, and then it goes up to 6%, 7%. And on the higher end apartment, it can still reach 8% and 10%. Now, there's a lot of ways to try and save you a lot of money on the tax. And we will actually speak about that in a webinar, which will be dedicated to the question of taxes relating to the purchase of property in Israel. But if you, for example, move to Israel within 2 years, become an Israeli resident within 2 years, and you do not own another apartment in Israel, you can get a lower purchase tax, which would actually start at 0, 3.5%, and 5%. If you're an Oleh Hadash, even if you own another apartment in Israel, you can get the apartment at 0.5% and then go up to 5%. If you're buying over the green line, for example, and you're not an Israeli resident or citizen, so you can actually you can buy an apartment without paying any purchase tax or capital gains tax when you sell it, because the Israeli tax law does not apply to you. So the tax system is very, very, very complicated when it comes to Israel. There's many ways around to try and save you money. And as I said, we will dedicate a specific webinar just for the idea of purchase tax because it's very complicated. Ben, I wanted to, we had a question that was asked about where are the prices going to in the market in Israel at the moment with COVID-19 and people are not able to travel.
Sure.
If you can give us a short talk about it.
Absolutely. Very good question, very relevant for today. I think the answer lies in Israel as a whole and then very insular markets. So in answer to Israel as a whole, I think prices might be stable, but might be in a place where it could be a good opportunity to buy. There might be some opportunities to purchase at the right price. However, in central locations, like for example, Jerusalem, I'm going to talk for Jerusalem, but I'm also going to talk for a good colleague of mine in Tel Aviv, who I was talking to last week about this. Because there's so few units on the market which tick most boxes. So let's talk about a stereotypical purchase of maybe someone from abroad who wants to potentially retire or have a holiday home or something like that. So they're looking for 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. It must have 2 bathrooms. It must have parking, must be modern, not have very many stairs, and have a sukkah. Because there's so little supply of such things to the market, I can say that I really have, and this doesn't mean it won't change, but currently I think prices are, if anything, pretty stable. And I've got to say, in terms of Americans buying, I've actually seen, if I've compared my my business this year to last year in terms of this month and last month, transaction-wise, I think we're seeing a bit more actually, because I think the buyers are actually thinking that prices are stable at the moment. And while COVID goes on, we don't know what's going to go on, but there seems to be quite a lot of speculation. We're hearing from Nefesh B'Nefesh as well, that numbers are potentially going to go up dramatically after COVID. And I think that's making people think that the markets could potentially go up at that point. So I think though it's a stable market at the moment, I think you might actually be in quite a good situation to be a buyer at the moment if it was something you were looking to do and willing to do from abroad.
If I could just jump in, I wanted to answer a question here that I think is maybe relevant for everyone here. So I want to just answer it to everyone at the same time. Someone here is asking, is there an advantage to taking a mortgage in America versus Israel? There are advantages and there are disadvantages. So if you were looking, as an example, if you're looking for a 30-year fixed mortgage in US dollars, there's definitely advantage to taking that in America, as that product doesn't exist in Israel. What are the advantages of taking a mortgage in Israel? Well, specifically, if you wanted to take the mortgage in shekels, either wholly in shekels or partially in shekels, you wouldn't be able to do that from America, of course. Why would you want to take it in shekels, especially if you earn your income in dollars? Well, you may be buying a starter house in Israel, as an example, with the intention or with the idea that you may want to sell it in the coming years. Now, if you buy a property for $1 million again, and you're taking a $500,000 mortgage, and you take that in dollars, and the shekel were to appreciate significantly against the dollar, what that does is that makes you increase your sales price, 2, 3, 4 years out, whenever you want to sell it, means you'd have to increase your sales price in order to cover the mortgage debt that you took out in order to make that purchase. So by having the debt tied to the same currency in which the property is priced has its advantages. And again, if you find yourself unsure or you want to kind of mix and match, you can take half of the mortgage in shekels and the other half in dollars and do that all out of Israel. Again, that's not something you would be able to do out of America. Another instance where it might be beneficial to take a mortgage in America, let's say the borrower is 70 years old and they want a 30-year mortgage to keep their payment terms as reasonable as possible, their monthly mortgage payment as reasonable as possible. Again, in such an instance, it would be beneficial to take that mortgage in America.
Thank you, Tzvi. There's a few questions about tax, which I'll answer shortly, but a question that I was sent for Daniel. Daniel, do you need to open a bank account in Israel?
So that question I get asked a lot because it often follows, I heard, banking is just so difficult in Israel, do I need to get into that mess? So it really depends. If you need a bank account, then yes. So when do you need a bank account? Let's start with that. So let's talk about purchasing. So when versus renting. If you're going to be living in Israel, you should need to have a bank account. But if you're going to be abroad, you do not need to have a bank account at the beginning of the process. Meaning, I'm able to make all the payments on your behalf. That includes paying the seller, and there's a special way that sellers are paid in Israel, whether it's a new property, meaning firsthand, or secondhand, meaning someone's already living there, or the property already has a certificate of occupancy. So there's different ways of doing it, but we do them both. We're able to make the payments for the tax bill. We're able to make payments to Ben, to Yair, to Jeffrey, to Avi, anything that's all those types of, and of course to Tzvi. Any of those payments, as it relates to the real estate purchase, we're able to do for you. So that's as far as, the actual purchase of the property. So now let's just take it a little forward. So the house is already in your name. You've already received the equivalent of title. You've made all the payments to the seller. So now you're going to have your gas bill, your electric bill, the Arnona, which is the municipal tax, those types of carrying costs. So I want to throw this to Avi. What do you do in that situation? Does a person need to have a bank account, or how do you as a property manager work with those situations?
So that's a good question. In the last couple of years, many of my clients have decided to close their Israeli bank accounts. It's very complicated with taxes. It's just a lot to deal with. We can pay all their bills on their US credit cards. Some companies are easier than others. For example, the electric company, you can't pay on auto pay. So it's fine. Our office calls up. We pay about 70 electric bills a month over the phone, and we cover that. So most of our people are closing their accounts. You can do everything over credit card now. There's no need to have an account in Israel.
But let me just throw this back to Tzvi.
Unless, of course, you want a mortgage.
Exactly. That's why I'm throwing it back to you.
Yeah. The way you pay your mortgage in Israel is that the bank will auto debit your bank account every month. That is the only way to pay a mortgage in Israel. You can't pay by credit card. You can't send in a check or a wire transfer. So if you want a mortgage in Israel, you would need to keep a bank account open here.
But Tzvi, is that if a person's in America and they need to do a mortgage, what's the process for you getting them a bank account?
So we usually open up an account at the same bank in which they're taking their mortgage. We send them all the documentation that they would need to fill out. Included in that documentation is the power of attorney. The attorney can sign on everything for you, open up the bank account for you, and that's how the process goes. It's rather painless, actually, to open a bank account. We do hundreds of them every year, and I can't say that the banks in Israel are a pleasure to work with. Perhaps I would say far from it.
That's not just for foreigners. That's for Israelis as well.
No, that's for everyone, but all the more so for Americans. They really hate Americans.
Right. Well, if they liked Americans, then I wouldn't have a business.
Correct. And if they were transparent about mortgages, I may need to find a new profession as well. Yeah, in terms of if you want a mortgage in Israel, you will need to have a bank account.
I'll just elaborate a bit on what Tzvi has said, and this is something that I do with many of my clients. At the beginning, when you want to go ahead and move, after you found the apartment with Ben, for example, and then you want to move ahead with the purchase, so I would send you certain documents that have to be approved in the US by either Israeli consulate or by a service called an apostille in order for them to be valid in Israel. If the clients want to either take a mortgage or if they need an account afterwards to, for whatever reason, then I would send them a power of attorney for the banks to open an account with them. Now, there are certain banks in Israel which are easier to work with when you're a foreigner, and certain banks which I would tell you to really stay away because they become more and more difficult. But this is part of what, the service that we give. You can open an account, so you can do all your financing. The one caveat that I would say when we open an account in your name is that until you actually get to Israel and open and come to the branch so they can identify and get your signatures on the account, every transaction would have to happen through the power of attorney. So in this case, it would be me. You will, of course, have access to see any transaction happening, but to take an action, it would actually you'd have to give, whoever you gave the power of attorney, the instructions of what you want to do. And a couple of questions that we had here about taxes, and then I'm going to ask a question to Jeffrey. The question about taxes, as I said, we will have a whole webinar just about taxes, but I'll answer these two quick questions. The first question was that by Debbie, saying she understands that the tax relief for Olim buying their first property in Israel. How does this work if a property is bought before Aliyah is made? So like I said, you have two different kinds of leniencies when it comes to purchase tax. The first is of a resident, and the second is for Aliyah. Now, they're not all the same, and it really depends on the purchase price, which one you want to use. The point of equilibrium, in a way, it's about 5 to 5.5 million shekels. If you buy anything below that, then it's better to use your first resident, first time buying as a resident, because it would be lower tax than an Aliyah, right? But if you own already an apartment in Israel, or if you're buying it more expensive, then you want to use your Aliyah. Now, how does it work? They look at when did you purchase the apartment compared to when you actually became an Israeli resident or when you made Aliyah. For the Aliyah right, you can use it if you bought the apartment up to 1 year prior to moving to Israel, to becoming an Ole Hadash, to up to 7 years post making Aliyah. Now, there is a caveat that if you are buying from a builder and the apartment is not ready, you can actually extend it not just 1 year, but can extend it up to 3 years. So if you buy from a builder up to 3 years, you can buy prior to making Aliyah, and you can still get the lower tax rate. If you're using your resident right, then you have to become a resident of Israel, even if you're not a citizen, within 2 years. So what might happen would be you'd have to pay the full purchase tax. And then once you move to Israel, we will file an appeal to the tax office and ask them to get the money back. And as long as you keep to those parameters, then we will get you the money, not just the money you've paid, but it's going to be linked to the index plus interest from the government. So all in all, it's very simple for us to do it, and your lawyer should guide you through the process. Another question was, is it possible to address purchase tax on a second apartment purchased by a non-Israeli? The general tax is 5, 6, 7%, as I said, and goes up to 8 to 10%. So whether you're buying it as a second apartment or as a non-Israeli, this would be the tax. It would also be the same tax for an Israeli buying his second apartment. So this doesn't make any difference. The leniencies, as I said, for an Israeli resident or an Ole Hadash are if you keep to the criteria. So otherwise, it doesn't matter if you're an Israeli buying your second apartment, your third apartment, or if you're buying it from abroad, it would be the same tax for everybody. It would be the 5, 6, and 7%. Now, a question that was raised and asked for Jeffrey, there's actually two questions. Does it pay to send things from the US or just purchase everything in Israel? And the second question is, what about taxes on items being bought in the US versus Israel?
Okay, so Yair, I'll answer that. We, after all these years of doing this, we discovered what we recommend clients to buy in the US, let's say, or what's beneficial for them to buy in Israel. Whatever you buy in the US, we'll send it and you'll purchase it tax-free, as long as you can prove, which we have, proof that it's going on a container and it's going out of the country. So you'll buy it in the US, let's say tax-free. When it arrives in Israel, then you'll pay the 17% VAT. Obviously, whatever you buy in Israel, you have to pay 17% VAT because that's how we all live in Israel, and there's 17% VAT on anything that we buy. Regarding what to buy in the US and what to buy in Israel, we'll guide you through it. Like, for example, if one was doing over his kitchen, we'd recommend that the cabinetry, the stonework is all bought in Israel, meaning whatever's screwed to the wall. Certain appliances, for example, are less expensive for whatever reason to buy in Israel than they are to even send them from the States, and vice versa. So for whatever reason, dishwashers, microwaves, less expensive, because you have to also include the freight, the cost of the container, packing, wrapping, shipping, getting it 6,000 miles. But things like refrigerators and ovens and wall ovens, things like that are less expensive when we ship them from the States. And very often, when we're doing a home or we're doing a project, for the client, it might be also just easier, even if it is the same cost as it is in Israel. Let's just say you did a spreadsheet on and you went to buy mattresses, for example, and you're going to buy them in Israel, you're going to buy them in the States, but you happen to live in the States. And you know what, especially with today's times of not being able to travel so easily, if it costs you the same thing, then we'll provide you with all the paperwork that you need, a container. You can go to Costco, you could shop, you could send even personal items. And often when we're doing the house for people, Yair, what we'll do is we'll visit their home if there are things that they want to send from their current home here in the States, whether it's artwork or some kind of heirloom piece or whatever, and we'll draw it into the plan and help them, bring it from point A to point B. So there's different things, and it's clear cut, but there's we have our list of what we recommend.
Jeffrey, there's a continuous question for you. It says, don't you have to consider that you can't use the same electric current in America and Israel?
Yes, absolutely. So anything that we're shipping, for example, like a refrigerator, a Sub-Zero, or a Decor oven, it will be in 220. We have sources here in the US that make sure that before it leaves here, it's done in 220. And then the next question, whoever's asking that might want to know also regarding warranty. So the people here that we work with in the US work with the Israeli warranty company called, for one of them is called Kedar. And the appliance will come with a 2-year warranty or a 1-year warranty, or you could buy another 3 years or do whatever you want. But on the paperwork you're buying here in the US, it says 1 year Kedar, whatever. And then when the goods show up in Israel, when that item shows up in Israel, we're there to make sure to receive it, make sure it's not damaged, scratched, broken, and make sure that Kedar is the one who installs it, because that's what starts the warranty. So if you were to, God forbid, decide to plug in your refrigerator yourself, it's a problem. So we'll be there to, make sure all the laws are all met and all the requirements are met, so the warranty is, on whatever item it is that you're buying.
Right. And something that I did that I did it for my house. I also did it for my parents' house, that when it was in the construction phase, I brought over a heavy duty transformer, and I had it installed underneath the cabinet. Again, this weighs, 30 pounds. Like, it's a real heavy duty converter. And I had wiring done from the converter going to special plugs, so that in my house, I have certain plugs that are for like my US appliances, and the rest of the house is for the Israeli 220. So this way I didn't have to go buy all new appliances. And I'm sure, Jeffrey, when you're talking about a apartment that's still under construction, there's a
Right.
lot more of possibilities. Or even if it's not under construction, if you're doing some renovation or you're doing anything, you're going to have exposed. You'll have some exposed wires, or they can clean up before you move in. That you have a lot of possibilities. So you shouldn't think that you're coming to a third world country. You can have everything here.
We've even in some of the projects we've worked on where, let's say they're not where, let's say the client's living in, or they're just coming for holidays or whatever. We've also, like you'll see in some of the better hotels where we put in the outlets, for example, in the bathrooms, they have 220 and 110. So if you're traveling with your shaver and you want to plug it in, like you plug it in at home in your house in Manhattan, we could accommodate that also. So we're on top of, look, we're accommodating an American, foreigner population. So we know exactly what they need. And because we work here in the US and in Israel, so we know exactly what our US clients need here in their homes in Israel. And we try to we duplicate it for them. So you don't even feel like you're compromising on anything when you're here in Israel.
Thank you, Jeffrey and Daniel. I've just had a couple of follow-up on my tax question. I think they were not clear, so I just want to make it clear. Purchase tax on a second apartment, whether you're an Israeli or a resident, it's exactly the same. There's no difference whether you're a foreigner or not. Any second apartment, Israeli or foreigner, it's the same tax, and it was lowered a few weeks ago to 5%, 6%, and 7%. And the other question of Aliyah is if you buy the apartment either 1 year prior to making Aliyah, or you can use the right if you buy it up to 7 years post making Aliyah. It's not 7 years before making Aliyah. The period is 8 years. A year before you make Aliyah, if you buy it, or up to 7 years, you can use it. So if you made Aliyah and lived in Israel for 10 years, your Aliyah right has expired. You can't use it. If you bought it more than a year before making Aliyah, unless you buy it from a builder, as I said before, then you can't use it. So it's between 1 year to 7 years, but we will touch all these topics at the webinar about the taxes. There are a couple of questions here for you, Ben. Maybe you can help us with these. Someone is looking for an investment property, an apartment that can rent out to cover costs. He's asking whether it's Netanya or Ra'anana, which town would be better. We will touch it in the webinar, but Ben, I want you to have a short answer. And there is another question. If what is your assessment of the price of real estate in Jerusalem these days, both existing and on paper? Are the good deals this time, or is there a limited supply and hence higher prices due to supply and demand?
Okay, thanks, Yair. Netanya Renana, I'm going to make a disclaimer straight away. I'm just going to comment more on the idea of buying something covering costs. If that person emails me, I will put you in touch straight away with someone who can answer that question specifically on the area, because I really don't like to comment on things that aren't my complete expertise. But can you buy an apartment to cover your costs? It's a very tough one in Israel, because you're putting down normally, not all the time, but roughly 50% in most situations. So you are able to buy things where you can cover your expenses, especially because if you rent it out long term, the tenant pays all the costs, but you have to look very carefully and get very good advice. It definitely isn't as blanket as saying yes. And number two, Jerusalem, I mentioned earlier, but let me expand briefly, because I liked one aspect of the question which I didn't touch on, which is opportunities. Do opportunities exist? So I think the real opportunities exist in the new build projects, and that's not as a rule. A lot of new build projects are very expensive, but there are rules and bank guarantees here, and there's targets that the developers have to meet. And it often is the case, and I had this about a month ago, that a developer had to meet the requirements of the bank. So he had to sell 2 units within a couple of weeks, and therefore there really was good space in the price to really make a deal, basically. And I've got this as well at the moment in the building in the German colony, where they're not actually desperate with the bank, but they're just very sensible. Developers often, if they've got stock, are looking to move that stock, especially if they've got too much of it. So at the moment in the current market, the only place you're really seeing great opportunities are twofold. Firstly, with developers, if they've got too much stock and they want to get rid of, let's say, 50% of the stock they have, so that they're left with only 2 or 3 units, or so that the bank can be satisfied. Or also, and this doesn't happen as much as the States, but we could see it more in the next few months on the COVID situation, which is people are struggling to make repayments. Now, it's not completely like America where there's so many repossessions or anything like that, but obviously, so we can talk about it more, but you have to keep up your repayments here. And it could be that if someone knows they can't do it or is very tight, that they might want to sell quite quickly. Again, you don't generally see the kind of opportunities you do in America to stop foreclosures, but that is where opportunities do exist. So if anyone's looking for $1 million to $1.5 million, the new builds are the things to talk to me about. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. There's another question that I think both of us need to answer. First of all, how about purchasing in Tama 38? Is that a risk? From a legal point of view, if you buy a new apartment from Tama 38, it's the same as if you're buying from a new build from a contractor. You will get the same guarantees and the same warranties as you would get in a new project. With regards to the real estate aspect, Ben, if you can elaborate on that.
Very, very quickly, just because there's a lot of questions, which I'm very happy to answer. I think you just have to know what you're buying. I sell a lot of new apartments. I sell a lot in Tama 38. I just think you have to understand what it is. They've taken an old building and added 2 floors on top and sometimes units on the bottom. I think they're very interesting opportunities for holiday homes and investments. I really do. The only point I would make is you just have to understand everything about the Tama 38. And for any new builds or Tama 38, you just have to understand the guarantees on offer, like that we'll talk about, and you have to know who the developer is. And the way I suggest dealing with these things is often I will literally call up a client I've sold an apartment to and say, Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, can you speak to this person and tell them about the process you've been through? Okay, because it's not for me always to say. And there's always certain things that you need to know about each builder. Some are just late, and some people don't mind that. If you're making your payments over 18 months and they're delayed in event of them not completing or whatever it is, some people are happy with that. Whereas if someone's making Aliyah and needs their unit tomorrow, they need to understand what they're buying in and what the risks are.
There's another point which, with Tama 38, you have 2 types of Tama 38. You have Tama 38-1, which is basically an existing building which is extended. It's extended to the side and extended on top. So it's something that is added to an existing building. And you have a Tama 38-2, which is actually knocking down the building and rebuilding it from scratch, which is basically just as if you were buying in a new construction and has absolutely no difference to new construction. One topic that Ben touched, and then I'm going to ask Jeffrey a last question that was raised here. There was the question of timing and delivery of the apartment. In the law in Israel, actually, quite a few years ago, was changed that there has to be a penalty or a compensation for the buyer in case the apartment is delivered late. And the law actually dictates what the apartment used to be, because in the past, the builder just negotiated a very low price that would not get you much money back at all. But the law was changed a few years ago, so the penalty or your compensation for getting the apartment late is actually quite significant and can get you a nice amount back, and amount that should allow you to even rent while you're waiting for the apartment. We will conclude with this question to Jeffrey, because we said the webinar is not going to be more than an hour. But like I said, we're open to get on your questions. We will send a follow-up email, so you will be able to contact each one of us individually with any questions you might have. This is the idea of this panel. This is the idea of the webinar. So you are able to ask any questions that you might have. All of us are doing this on a daily basis. So, we know the answers, and we're here to help you and answer all these questions. So don't hesitate to ask us. This is the idea of why we're doing this, to help you realize your dream. Jeffrey, it's a follow-up question from before. It says, our appliances are not worth buying in the States, basically asking whether it's something to be considered at all. And I see there's another last question we'll ask Ben afterwards. So I apologize, not going to be the last one.
One second. Somebody asked me a question, which I'm sorry, I'm not cutting you off, Jeffrey, but I just wanted to say what the question is, but I think it's something that's such a great question that I think we should do a whole mini webinar about it, but I'll let Jeffrey answer.
I'll answer very quickly. So just to answer what Yair said about penalties for contractors not delivering on time and whatnot, and making sure that there's enough money in it, like so they could, if you need a rental or whatever it is, or to be put up in a hotel. So thank God if somebody hires our firm, we've never experienced it. Thank God. We tend to deliver early and we're never late. And if the contractor ever gets to that point that we're even talking about such a thing or penalties, we'll sooner kill him before he's late. So don't worry about it. Like, it just never happens. And that's part of why you hire us. Like, we hire the right people.
That's a renovation, but not when you buy from a builder. Many times there are actually, you need to take into consideration when you buy from a builder, they could be late, but when Jeffrey's involved, he's not late.
Yeah. So, and then regarding appliances, like I said, when it depends what you're buying, like I said, certain appliances, yes, buy in the States, certain appliances don't buy in the US. There are certain ones and certain brands, and we know the spreads because we're constantly comparing pricing. So we'll be able to help you with that and guide you to which ones to buy in the US and which ones not to, and which ones to buy in Israel and which ones not to buy in Israel. Okay, Daniel.
Thank you. And then we had a question just for Ben. It's like, where do I find out which neighborhood would be better investment regarding Netanya or Ra'anana? I think Ben will answer it also, but we will have a webinar specifically for these towns. Part of our, Ben, you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, definitely so. In our schedule that will be on our website next week, we're doing a specific one on, I can't remember exactly, but I think the session is Ra'anana and Netanya. But to the person who asked, please, just when you get the email from us, send me an email straight away and I'll connect you with someone who will answer you that, who's an expert in those cities. I don't want to speculate on something that is not my speciality, but I will help you with that as soon as you email me.
Thank you, Ben. And Daniel, last question to you.
The question, it's just too much to answer in just a couple of minutes that we have remaining. But somebody asked, for investment purposes, is it better to buy something that's not yet built, something on paper, or something that is ready built? So I think that we should do like a mini webinar on new construction versus existing construction, because there's so much to talk about there. And it's not something that can be answered in in a minute.
Yair, can I suggest that we stay open, but anyone who wants to log off, logs off?
Sure. Sorry, we'll be happy to answer more questions unless any of the panelists have to run, or anybody who is on the webinar, you're more than welcome to stay or leave. We'll leave it open for a few more questions.
The last thing, just to say very quickly, is if you like this session and you have any friends you think this could interest, we're doing a basic repeat of this session at 1 o'clock New York time today. Okay, 10 o'clock on the West Coast. If you have any friends you think it could interest, please feel free to tell them. That's number one. And number two, Yair, do you want to talk about next week's session, or do you want? Should I just do it?
Yeah, you can go ahead. I will just say that we're going to have on our website the list. Hopefully in the next week we'll have the list of all the upcoming events. The dates and what topics. You can choose to join one of them or all of them. We'll encourage you to join, of course, all of them. So or anything that's relevant to you. So you can get as broad education as you can about real estate in Israel, about what to expect and how things work here. Ben.
Sorry, I'm just replying to a question. I apologize. Okay. Next week, sorry, 1 second. Next week, we are doing budgeting and closing costs. And basically that session is going to be about a 20-minute to 30-minute session, just talking about the fees involved in buying, what you have to know and what you have to put on top of, if you're going to buy something for $1 million, how much is it really going to cost me? And that's what next week's session is about. You will have some experts on that. We'll be available to answer questions and all of that. And that's next week. We're going to stick around now. If anyone has any more questions or you see any more, feel free to ask.
I also just wanted to add in when Daniel just before spoke about making a whole webinar just on buying on paper versus buying something that's done already or something that's not built. It is on my end, on the design architecture, and it's a huge thing, because normally when somebody is buying, as we all know, on paper, it comes with what's called standards. And unfortunately, we see on my end that, a client will come to us, they bought it, and I said to them, like, what, we'll ask them, like, what's the standards that they're offering? Oh, they said, we're getting a really good kitchen. A really good kitchen really is not the kind of standard you want to buy. So, there's, like Daniel said, there's a lot to talk about regarding that topic of buying on paper versus buying something that you see that's actually finished and done. So I just want to add that in. I think it's a great webinar, just that alone.
I think to go with that would be when you're looking at an apartment, and to have you can buy either a apartment that was just renovated or an apartment that needs renovation. Again, assuming that it's cheap, that everything else being equal, but that it's the apartment that needs renovation is cheaper than the apartment that doesn't need the renovation. And is it, what are the factors involved with taking on a project of renovation versus having it something that's been newly renovated? So maybe we can do that also in that same
and one more thing, just because an apartment does, let's say you're buying into a building where it does come with standards, meaning they'll do the bathrooms, they'll do the kitchen for you, or whatever, there's still work involved. You can't just show up initial one day and say, okay, what am I getting? And they'll, it's days of work. They need plans. There's a lot more involved than just, buying an apartment that comes with a kitchen and bathroom, because you need to make those selections, which is where we come in, where we can assist you from, like I said, 6,000 miles away, and help you with all of that.
Yeah.
There's a very good question that was just posted, and I think Ben and I need to answer it. We will actually have a whole webinar just about this specific question, but I'll raise it up. Debbie, you wrote about the question of church land. There's no really further update about the negotiation on the church land. It's still very much up in the air, especially because the lease is coming to an end. People that own apartments in Rehavia or in Talbia or in other cities or other parts of Jerusalem, which are leases from the church, the leases have not expired yet, so it didn't come to the end. So we don't really have an answer to give you. But from what I know, that it does definitely affect the price, as Ben will answer shortly and expand about it. But it's something that we will know a little bit in the future. It's not a done deal. The real question is, I believe that the people are not going to have to give up their apartments. People would still keep it. It mostly would be a question of how much it would cost to renew the lease. So the real question is how much risk adverse you are. If you don't mind taking the risk in order to try and get a gain, the prices are quite good right now. But if you don't like the risk, then you shouldn't buy it. But Ben will elaborate now about the prices of church land in Jerusalem right now.
I'm also going to answer one other question from earlier, and then we can either close up, or if there's any more, we'll answer them. Okay, Debbie, hi. So basically, church land, is it a good investment? What does it mean? I mean, I'll tell you, I have a lot of experience in the last 3 months of clients calling me up and saying, we own these investment apartments, we own this. What is the value of our apartment today? The seller of the land, who sometimes is a church, sometimes a private companies. I mean, there's a family here who own a lot of the church land, they're a corporation, and they are asking a lot of money for these renewal of these leases. And when you budget it and you add the money up, I mean, it's way better to look for other apartments. The only time that church land gets interesting to buy is when there's a really realistic seller who just wants to cash in because they're in a tricky situation. And in that case, and it's case by case, you might get that opportunity. But the problem is you don't know what the renewal is. You don't know how much you're going to have to pay for your lease. So my answer to you is, if you're an investor, if you have a portfolio of apartments, if you've got X number, 5, 10, 20, whatever it is, church land could be an interesting little part of a diverse portfolio. If it was my only home I was going to buy, I personally would not buy it. That doesn't mean I'm telling everyone not to buy it. That's just my own personal opinion. Just two other very quick things I saw. Gary Shapiro asked something to Svi, but he also asked about renting. He asked, is renting a good option? All I can tell you is the good bits and the bad bits about renting. The good bits about renting are if you can secure yourself a long lease, you know you're settled, you know what you're paying, and you can invest your money in other places if you believe you can invest it well. The real risk, I think, of renting is not a financial risk necessarily. It's if you're going to retire and rent, you're potentially going to be moving all the time. And that's not something you necessarily want to do in retirement. The final question was someone asked me about buying in hotels or buying in, I think also she mentioned serviced apartments. Buying in hotels, it does occur. It's definitely not what I specialize in. But there are luxury buildings where you can buy apartments with all the services of a hotel, but you're not involved in some kind of contract with the hotel, which is something I much prefer. I prefer that you own the apartment and you're in charge of it. So that is definitely an option. Buying in hotels is an option, but it's something you should email me about privately and I can connect you with someone that sells those kind of things. Yeah.
I think this is the last question that we had. As I said before, we will be sending out a follow-up email with the contact details of all the panelists and everybody on the video with us today, so you can contact each and every one of us individually. I encourage you all to look up our website for the upcoming webinars on different topics and sign up to them. And we hope to see you in our future webinars. Take care and have a great day.
Take care. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.